Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. Ben McCormick here with Clinton Weaver. We're going to talk a little bit about some crazy basketball that's been going on for the last couple games for Duke. It's been smooth sailing for a little while for the Blue Devils, who are now on a 14-game win streak. No denying that, but it's been a little bit rougher than usual the past two games. The wins have been a little bit more difficult to come by for the Blue Devils. Most recently, of course, NC State came to town. Now, this is the team that took Duke out in the Elite Eight, took them out in the ACC tournament. I was front row, media row, to watch NC State take Duke out in Washington, D.C. in the ACC tournament last year. I certainly haven't forgotten about it. My girlfriend goes to State. She doesn't let me forget about it. It's always there. It's always around. And so I'm looking forward to this one. You got to get back. Kevin Keatts has seemed to have John Shire's number for whatever reason. But, I mean, after yesterday, even still, he's 3-3 against State, Shire is. So for some reason, still, he can't get past them. They're just always lurking, always creating this obstacle that maybe shouldn't be there, but is. And so yesterday, I'm covering high school basketball for my day job. I get out of that. It's an away game. I get back to the office where I kind of hunker down to watch the rest of the Duke game. I've missed most of the first half, but not all of it. I've been listening to it, keeping up with it. I probably put it away for about 10 minutes to get some food, go into the office. I pull up my computer, pull up the game, 35-22 NC State. I'm just like, dude, what? What do you mean it's 35-22? But it was. Dontrez Styles going nuclear on him. Trey Parker going nuclear on him, although a lot of his work was done in the second half. But just pretty much everything that could go wrong for Duke went wrong. When you're talking about a State team that shoots abysmally from three, I mean, the only dude with a respectable three-point percentage is Breon Pass, and he just barely shoots at all in a given game. So just wild that State would shoot that well, but of course they would against Duke, because for some reason they play that well. I mean, I texted some people and I was like, why doesn't State do this against Carolina? I remember watching them play Carolina a few weeks ago, and it was like the worst performance I'd ever seen in my entire life. And if they had played like they did against Duke against them, they would have beat Carolina by like 20. So, but I don't get why they turn up so well for Duke, but they do. And Duke had to deal with that. They had to deal with that, and they dealt with it in stride. They were able to make that big push by halftime to make it close. And then in the second half, they went on that huge defensive run to get the lead back. But there was one guy who really stood apart from the rest, and we're going to talk plenty about him. But before we dive deep into that second half, Clinton, I want to get your impressions on that first half. Where was your mind at? Were you genuinely worried that Duke might get upset in Cameron by the Wolfpack?
Well, I was texting with my brother before the game, and he was saying, it could be close. And I was like, nah, we're going to kill these guys, This is going to be a blowout, 20 plus. I couldn't have been more wrong. And it was looking pretty bad. I was texting him during the game saying, man, this is ugly. And it was ugly in the first half. For a while there, it was looking pretty bleak in terms of a victory, but they did manage to close it to within 4 by halftime. And I think probably everybody felt at that point that we could certainly overcome a 4-point deficit. But they looked tired, It was a 48-hour turnaround from Wake Forest. People are logging heavy minutes without Malik Brown in the lineup, and it's starting to show. They didn't have any chance to practice. It was just a rest day on Sunday, and then this game. So it was the classic trap game, I guess you would say. A short turnaround, Carolina coming up, and if they're going to overlook one, it would be this one.
Well, let's detour to that Wake Forest game for a minute, because in a lot of ways, there were a lot of parallels. Now, obviously, Duke's actually the one that built that 15-point lead. It wasn't quite 15 for State, but nearly. They built that huge lead in the first half and then squandered it at the very beginning of the second half for me against Wake Forest, I had a predicament on Twitter where I was basically just like, yeah, this one's over, guys. When Duke went on that like 15-minute stretch where they couldn't hit a single shot to save their life, and it's not like Wake Forest was doing all that much offensively because Duke's defense held pretty strong for the most part in the second half against Wake, but I'm not sure the last time I saw Duke play worse offensively than they did in that 15-minute stretch in the second half against Wake Forest. That was just horrible. And any other game I've ever watched Duke play where they've looked even remotely close to the way they did against Wake Forest in the second half, they do not win that game. I think the only team that I can remember in the last 15 years that could have even possibly won that game was the 2015 championship team. Every other team would have fallen flat on their face. Even 2019, which was a number one overall team, I mean, you play that poorly, you shoot the ball that poorly, you're not going to win. And the comparison I made actually was to the Syracuse game in 2019, where basically Duke couldn't get downhill because Syracuse was just letting R.J. Barrett and Jack White shoot whenever and however they wanted from three, and the two of them combined to go 4 of 27. Now, it wasn't quite that bad for Duke against Wake in the second half, but it felt kind of similar to that at times. I mean, they were missing layup after layup after layup, and I was just like, yeah, we're done here. And everybody got on my case, and they were like, yeah, dude, maybe don't call it that early. And I've learned my lesson with this team, because I think normally I would have been right, but with this team I was wrong, and the number one reason why Ben was wrong, Cooper Flagg. So I'd like to apologize to Mr. Flagg, because I will not doubt you again. And that is the reason why when it came 13-point deficit, NC State, I was sitting there thinking, well, this sucks. And a lot of these guys aren't playing particularly well. Kahn played pretty well, but for some reason, there was never a moment where I was like, they're actually going to lose this game. Because I saw what happened on Saturday. I saw what Cooper Flagg could do, and what Cooper Flagg can do is just decide, we're not going to lose this game. And he has done it twice in a row now.
He is Superman, There's, I'm sure if he stripped off his shirt, you would find an S under there. It's pretty amazing, the competitive fire, the drive, the want to that he brings to the game, and he's relentless. And without fail, he amazes me. He does something in every game that amazes me and actually makes me laugh out loud. In the state game, it was when he took the ball the length of the court and decided he was going to dunk it at the end. And he just does things that, mere mortals cannot do. Last 3 games, he's been pretty reliable, 28, 24, 28. I'll take that. And I think we got the player of the year on our hands, and a lot of people have acknowledged a generational talent.
So for me, that play for Cooper was the one where he drives down the lane, and everybody in the entire universe thinks he's going to shoot it, except for him and Patrick Gongba, who seemingly have this mental connection that they know what's about to happen, and he just in one solid movement tip passes that thing to Pat. He lays it in, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was absolutely gorgeous. And shout out to Gongba for playing the role he did. I'm sure we're going to talk more about that. But I'm glad you mentioned the Player of the Year conversation, because it feels like everybody in their right mind has kind of changed their mind from 3 weeks ago when Janai Broome was the leader for NPOY. And now they're like, okay, it's Cooper Flagg, clearly. He's the guy in the lead. But I'm going to call out Mr. John Rothstein for saying Cooper Flagg has been ridiculous, but Janai Broome helped Auburn navigate the toughest non-conference schedule in the history of the program, and the Tigers are undefeated in the best SEC in our lifetime. All of that matters. As of today, Broome leads for National Player of the Year. Maybe in your book, John, but I don't think everybody else has the same story as you, man. I'm pretty sure Cooper Flagg's winning that thing if the season ended today. Pretty much no doubt in my mind, because Janai Broome isn't getting better. Cooper Flagg is, by the day. He's completely and totally willing Duke to victory, almost by himself at times, not completely for a full game effort, but there are stretches during games where he's fighting the good fight by himself. And I can't say the same for Janai Broome. Like, Tahad Pettiford's better than him half the time, so it's okay. Much more of a team effort going on most of the time. But for as good as Cooper is doing what he does and carrying them, it comes with its concerns because it's like, well, what happens when this 18-year-old kid slips up? Or if this 18-year-old kid slips up in one game, in a big game? Because, like, yeah, Con Knippel had a pretty good game against State. And Sion James had a pretty good game against State. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But for me, it was like you held State scoreless for the first for like 8 minutes consecutively, right? And especially there starting the second half, and you were only down 4 going into halftime, and you were only able to build an 8-point lead. And there was a moment where I was like, maybe that 8-point lead wasn't going to be enough. It ended up being enough, but State kept it close. They kept fighting. But it really wasn't because Duke played bad defense. Duke's defense was terrific. They were forcing State into contested threes, most of which turned into air balls at the beginning of the second half. But when you kind of look at what did they hit, well, Trey Parker desperations, but he was just kind of on fire for whatever reason. And so you'll live with that. But Duke's offense at times can be difficult to watch from a perspective of what is actual good basketball, because it's like you want to see the distribution of the ball, so many guys being able to impact offense. But when push comes to shove against State, 4 points from Gongva, 2 from Gillis. That's all you get off the bench. Tyrese Proctor, who was talking big game about wanting to get revenge on State earlier in the offseason, put up a fat 4 points. Caleb Foster, the other returning player from the team, only played 7 minutes, 0 points. Malawach, obviously had his whole predicament, which we'll touch on. But he had just 4 points. And so it's like, man, I love Cooper, man, and I love watching him work. But I'm getting a little bit worried. It's like, yeah, he carried him past Wake, he carried him past State. What happens if a game like this happens against Auburn? Like, is he going to be able to do it in a game like that? So, like, Clinton, do you have the same concern that I'm having? Do you at least see what I'm saying?
For sure, they've been struggling to come out with these victories, and these are not tremendously great opponents. You see what's happening to Wake Forest tonight. They're getting waxed by Louisville as we speak. And, against a better quality opponent, definitely could be trouble at the OK Corral. A victory covers a host of sins, but the first half was super ugly offensively for Duke. If you look at the last 2 games, Cooper is only 2 out of 10 from 3. During the last 2 games, Con was 5 out of 15 against State and 3 out of 10 from 3. Tyrese was 1 out of 6 and 0 of 2 from 3. And those are the big 3, right? So they're struggling individually in some ways and collectively, and these games are not high-quality opponents if we're going to be real about it. I think the rotation has gotten short. We've not gotten anything out of Foster or Evans the last couple of games. And, we keep winning, but come March, when the opponents get better, this will not cut the mustard.
Well, it's funny because I've been waiting so long to see when will Con Knippel and Tyrese Proctor play well in the same game. So Tyrese has been going through a pretty rough stretch right now. Like, I thought he was on pace to cross the 1,000-point threshold in his career late regular season. Right now, I think it might take into the postseason if he keeps playing the way he's playing. Not that that's terribly important when it happens, but it's kind of indicative of his struggles because this dude, 4 points in this one. He's laid a goose egg. And in the past 4 or so games, the only game he played well was at Boston College, where he put up 20 points, which was a great game for him. But then that same day, Con doesn't score, right? So it's like you get one or the other, but not both. Well, if they got both in any given game, that feels like a guaranteed win. Because Cooper's going to Cooper, man. He's going to do what he's going to do. But if you can get Tyrese and Con to play well in the same game, like really well, I'm not saying like both of them score 12 or something, but both play really well, that's when Duke could be at its best, but I just don't know when, if, or how that's going to happen. Obviously, Proctor is struggling right now, and that's something I would really like to see him figure out. And it's funny because on the call with ESPN last night, into the game, they foul Tyrese Proctor, and Corey Alexander's like, well, that's the guy Duke wants going to the line. And I'm thinking, not really. I mean, like, percentage-wise, maybe it should be, but it's really not, because read the room for the last few games. I'd much rather Cooper Flagg be the guy at the line. I'd much rather Con Knipple be the guy at the line. I don't really want Tyrese there, and I hate, even for a moment, not trusting Tyrese Proctor to do something, because he's the captain of this team, he's the veteran of this team, and he's a guy that I have a ton of confidence in, but lately he's really begun to struggle.
3 out of 18 the last 2 games from the field, and looks like 1 out of 9 from 3. So, yeah, he'll need to snap out of that, and I think he will before the end of the year. I really think we're seeing some fatigue because 6 people are getting heavy minutes, really 5. But the rotation is not deep. We've gotten some good minutes out of Gongba. Yes, he has stepped up for sure. But they're missing having Malik Brown. I hate to hang it all on Malik, but it shows up in a lot of different ways. So sooner we can get him back and deepen the rotation a little bit, and then hope a couple of these guys come out of these slumps that they're in. And then I don't know what's going on with Evans. He's played 3 minutes and 3 minutes and goose eggs the last 2 games with only 1 shot taken. So he seems to be maybe in Shire's doghouse, or maybe he just wasn't a fit for those 2 games, but 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in practice with Isaiah. You've got to think that in some way there would have been space for him in that game, because they shoot 4 of 20 from 3 on the night, and it's like, well, who's the guy that can get you out of those bad shooting slumps? It's proven time and time again this season to be Isaiah Evans. And so there's certainly value in that, but I think that maybe it was because State was just shooting so well from 3. Shire didn't trust him defensively. I don't know. Maybe it could have been that, or like I said, who knows what's going on in practice. But I do want to go back to that point you made about fatigue, because fatigue was clearly an issue against State. Like, Cooper Flagg, team on his shoulders, team on his back. That guy looked beat. Just I have never seen a human being look more tired in my life than Cooper Flagg, man. That guy looked like he was about to keel over at points. And so I don't know what was at work. I don't know if it was because it was they had played just 48 hours earlier in a tough game, or if it was the heat in Cameron Indoor Stadium, because obviously a crazy did pass out. I hope that young woman is doing all right. And then, or maybe it was, and some people have suggested this, maybe there was some sort of illness going around the team, like a cold or a stomach bug, something like that. Obviously, we saw Kaman Malawach throw up on the court, something I have not seen in Cameron Indoor Stadium, so that was crazy, and it made me really, really happy not to be a media member taking pictures, actually, because I'm sitting there like, dude, what if this had happened to me? Like, that would have been really rough. But I hope Malawach is okay. I hope the young lady that passed out are okay. But obviously, some kind of condition going on in Cameron, whether it be illness, heat, total fatigue, stress, a little bit of everything. Something was working on the Blue Devils Monday night. And so now they've got, 5 days to shake it off before they play Carolina. And let's hope that they can, because that was tough to watch, man. And it was impressive to see them still fight through that fatigue, because again, normally you'd see that level of fatigue in a college basketball team and chop that up as a loss. But in more ways than one, the last 2 games have concerned me, but I think my concern has been eclipsed by my being impressed by how good they have been at responding to adversity, responding to situations that they should not be able to dig themselves out of, and yet they have.
Yeah, we're a little spoiled. They keep winning, and here we are complaining, we're not winning, but by so much, But it's a good problem to have when you keep coming out on the winning end of the score. I don't think Malawach is going to get any endorsement deals from Gatorade anytime soon. It's amazing how much liquid came out of that 7'2" body of his. And this will forever.
It's amazing how many towels they use too.
Right. This will forever be known as the vomit game, I believe, for better or for worse. But you can't say he didn't leave it all out on the floor, because he certainly did.
Who knew they had that many towels in Durham, North Carolina? There must have been 100 towels on that floor.
Yeah, I hope.
I mean, just wow.
I hope they didn't have the Gatorade logo. I couldn't really tell, but that's what Shire said afterward. He chugged a little too much Gatorade, and what happens, I guess.
I think they did have the Gatorade logo on the towels
well,
too.
There you go.
Gatorade cleaning Gatorade.
Right. Free advertising.
Yeah, definitely. But ultimately, a game that shouldn't have been as close as it was. But a win's a win, man. A win's a win. It doesn't give you the warm fuzzies that it happened right before the Carolina game. But, we'll see if they turn things around, if those 5 days of rest end up being just what the doctor ordered. But I do want to go back to that Wake Forest game, because Wake Forest is a team that I think had been overlooked a lot of the season. To me, it was a team that is a top 4 team in the conference, that is a tournament team, should be a tournament team, but ultimately probably won't be by the end of the year, which I think has been the case for Wake Forest for the past few seasons. I think they have been a tournament team for like 3 consecutive years and failed to make it. I think this, unfortunately for Steve Forbes, will probably be the 4th installment of that trend. But when you look at this Wake team, a very good team, Duke obviously was able to take Cam Hildreth out of it with foul trouble, which was important. They were able to hold Hunter Salas to just 12 on the day. Leading scorer for Wake actually was freshman Juke Harris, who had 14. So weirdly enough, both Wake and State got some crazy contributions from freshmen, with Trey Parker and Juke Harris. But for that Wake game, it was nice to see a win. As negative as I was about that game in the second half, and I certainly was, I've apologized for my negativity since. But I think there was a lot to be happy about, because ultimately John Shire had never won there since he took over as head coach. They lost the first 2 games at Wake. And I still remember the court storming from last year, and I've kind of been at that on Twitter talking about the Blake Henson thing, and we haven't forgotten that with Pitt beat Pitt. We haven't forgotten the court storming beat Wake. We haven't forgotten State beating Duke in the Elite Eight, beat them. There might be a 4th installment of that coming soon for the Tar Heels. But I don't know. I mean, it's at Wake. It didn't used to be a game that you sweat over, but now it's become... I mean, it used to be a game, I think, for the 10 years prior that was tougher than it should be, but ultimately one that Duke still won. But lately, Wake Forest has become a little more formidable under Steve Forbes, and it's become a game that Duke has lost recently. And so, no matter how much better I think Duke was than Wake, and no matter how badly I think Duke played in that game, they won. And that's what matters, and they won through adversity and got what is a secondary rivalry win, but still, in essence, a rivalry win. The loss guts Wake Forest more than it makes us happy, but nonetheless, I'll take it.
It was sort of the opposite in some ways of the State game. We had the big lead at the half. It looked like we were going to cruise. We were up 13, autopilot, and then we opened the second half shooting 1 for 19, and everything changes. That was almost as ugly as the opening part of the State game. So we've had some cold stretches, but the thing that Shire seems to have discovered is zone defense, and that Wake game will be remembered for the fact that he went to the zone, and that seemed to trip up Wake Forest, they didn't know what to do against that and couldn't solve it. Kind of reminds me of the amoeba zone that Jerry Tarkanian used to run with the running Rebels. Maybe it's not supposed to be an amoeba, but Cooper admitted afterward he's never played zone in his life. But nevertheless, it worked, and then we did it again, and it worked again against State. So that's a new wrinkle now, and so maybe that's a good development that came out of having two games with some big time struggles.
It's so funny that Cooper Flagg has never played zone defense because it's like I'd never even given a thought to whether this generational talent of a basketball player had ever really played zone defense. But then when he said that, I gave it some thought and was like, yeah, well, why would any coach put in a zone defense when you have that kid, right? Like, you obviously play man to man. And then, like, Rob Dalster from Field of 68 pointed out that he was like, John Shire was talking about how it was a strategic, like, we went to zone, and he was like, very clearly Duke hadn't practiced playing a zone defense because it was kind of clunky and they didn't seem exactly ready for it, but they're just athletes, and I think they're just good players. And they put it together, and they did it well, and it threw Wake Forest because they weren't looking for it. But I think it's been really valuable that to have that zone in the back pocket, especially with Malik Brown out, because Malik Brown is the ultimate trump card of we can switch everything. Malawach can switch most things. I think he's a very versatile defender, but he's certainly not as quick on his feet with guards on the perimeter as Malik is. So it's difficult to switch everything. And then with Gongba playing as much as he did, especially against State, there down the stretch, Patrick, love him to death, and I think he's a great player. He can't switch everything, just straight up. He can't do that, especially against State, because State has so many guards that love to go downhill, and a lot of them that love to shoot three-pointers for one night and one night only. But couldn't do it with Gongba, but that zone worked well because he could hold down the middle, and then Duke was able to crash into those passing lanes, and they often forced turnovers from State when they threw that zone at them. And I guess it's just because these teams aren't prepared for it. A team that might be prepared for it's Carolina, but we'll see how that goes. We'll talk more about that. But I don't know. I think that zone was something I liked to see, and I would like to see more of it while Malik Brown is out. I don't know how much I want to see of it when Malik comes back. I don't know how much we will see of it when Malik comes back. Probably not much. But hopefully Malik comes back soon. I think that they said that he started kind of going through warm-ups and everything like that. I don't expect to see Malik back until for another couple weeks, probably. He'll certainly play before the end of the regular season, but I think there were people that when he first got injured, they were talking about 2-3 weeks in total, and I was like, that. The way John talked about it, I was always in the camp of it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be at least 4, like at least, and then maybe longer. But as long as they get him before the end of the regular season, I think that they'll be fine. Reintegrate him into that lineup and get him ready for the postseason. I don't think Duke should need him. I've said this before. I don't think they should need him to win games in the regular season. But as we've seen in the last 2 games, yeah, it really wouldn't hurt to take a little bit of pressure off of Mr. Flagg.
Well, you always see development of players when somebody goes down, and this is no exception where Big Pat has gotten some minutes that he wouldn't have ever had, and Gillis has really come forward, and developed during his absence, and we've been able to go small at times with Gillis at the 5. That's a different look, and Gillis has been productive on the offensive end. He's been a steady force that has benefited from Malik's absence. I think Malik gets a lot of credit, as he should, for his defensive prowess, but he's also a really good passer. And I do think we can beat Carolina without him. I'm a little more concerned about going down to Clemson a week later. So I would hope, wishful thinking, that we could have him back for the Clemson game. But we don't want to rush it, because I'd rather have him 100% healthy when it really matters than, bring him back too early and risk some sort of recurrence.
No doubt about that. Some crazy games though for the last few. Duke's on a 14-game winning streak. Who knows when or if that will end? Certainly, the if seems unlikely given the last two games, but you never know. The regroup could be more powerful than the slight fallback they've had over the last couple games. But nonetheless, 14 in a row is 14 in a row. They're the number 2 team in the country. They're an Auburn loss away from being the number 1 team in the country for whatever that's worth. Doesn't really make any difference. They just want to be a 1 seed. But they're rolling right along, and they're heading into their most heated and contested game of the year after beating 2 pseudo-rivals back-to-back in tough games. They might be in for an even tougher one. And that's something we're going to talk about next time here on the Duke Wisdom Podcast. As always, thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever it is that you listen. Follow Duke Wisdom on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And as always, thank you. We'll talk to you.